you start out 2014 with a resolution that sounded something like, my goal is to lose 20 pounds, or perhaps it was, my goal is to start living a more healthy lifestyle? Well, how's it going for you? Have you stuck to it? Living a healthy life is a lot more than simply claiming it as your New Year's resolution, as I'm sure you found out by now. It requires a full personal transformation in how you think and act when it comes to your health, nutrition, and fitness. Well, to talk about transforming your life and the way you are thinking about it, we have Brendan Brazier here. Brendan is a former professional Ironman triathlete, a two-time Canadian 50-kilometer ultra-marathon champion, and creator of the award-winning Whole Foods line Vega, and best-selling author of Thrive. Brendan, welcome to Success. I'd say I'm looking forward to chewing the fat with you and getting to the meat of the matter, but that would seem inappropriate, so I'll just say welcome.
All right. Thanks, Darren.
All right, so let's start off from the beginning, Brendan. In a nutshell, so to speak, give us your philosophy when it comes to personal wellness.
Well, I think it's obviously a lot to do with nutrition, but there's more to it than just that we can talk about as this goes on. But nutritionally speaking, I think plant-based whole foods are a good starting point and keeping things quite simple. You know, I think people kind of overthink nutrition sometimes, but really simplicity, just natural, simple foods combined properly is a really sound approach, and long-term and sustainable too.
So you obviously have a very health-focused background and orientation as a former professional triathlete and now as a fitness pro. So it's safe to say when it comes to health and nutrition, you aren't the average Joe. So explain why your philosophy on the subjects are important for the average person. Talk to us about parts of your philosophy that can make a significant difference that everybody can do but still get a great outcome.
Well, yeah, and that's what I found really works well with this way of eating. I started off doing it, as you mentioned, to be a better athlete. So it was all about getting more for less. I wanted to spend less energy, less nutritional or less digestive energy, and get more nutrition in. And an average person can benefit from that simply by not having to, same kind of thing, digest as much food and having to take in as much to get the same amount of nutrition. So that's one thing. Another thing would be inflammation. If you can reduce inflammation as an athlete, obviously that's huge because you don't have to work as hard. You don't have to spend as much energy to move, which brings down your heart rate, which increases your endurance. An average person, of course, you're still moving around. You walk throughout the day. And if your muscles are not inflamed, if they're flexible, if they're supple, then you don't have to spend that energy. And if you don't spend energy, you still have it. So it's really about just being aware of your output and your return on that output. And I think that can obviously help anyone. Also, there's big issues around sleep. You know, if you can get by with less sleep, you're going to be better off. And if you dial in your nutrition, you lower cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which means you wake up, you're fresh, you're rested, you're ready to go, don't crave coffee, don't crave sugar. And you can get by with less sleep because when quality goes up, quantity comes down. And I'm sure we could all use extra time throughout the day to do whatever it is we want to do.
So you are strictly vegan, I believe. So talk about why you became vegan in particular, and then the benefits that it's had in your life in regards to your energy and overall health and performance.
Well, I started out when I was 15, and I was just trying to be a better athlete. I was running track in high school, really enjoyed it. And I thought if I could make a career out of being an athlete, that would be amazing. I'd love to be able to do this full time as an occupation. And I tried a bunch of different ways of doing that, trying to be the best I could. And then I got a hold of some of the top athletes' training programs and looked at what they were doing. And what really surprised me was they were really very similar. The top guys in the world really didn't train that different from the average. So, of course, I asked myself, well, how is it that some of these guys are top in the world and others are just kind of mid-pack, yet their training is very similar? And I found it had to do with recovery, the rate at which you can get your body to regenerate and renew itself after exercise. That was huge. So I started focusing on recovery, the time in between the training. And I found that if I could speed that up, of course, I could train more in less time, which would mean I would improve at a faster rate, which of course was the goal. So I looked at all different recovery methods, massage, lots of stretching, yoga, and that's all good and that all worked. But nutritionally, I found to have a huge benefit just by eating different. And I tried different ways. I tried high carb, low carb, high protein, low protein. So a whole bunch of different types of diets, and some were better than others, but nothing was really amazing to me. And then I tried plant-based. And at first it didn't work, and I was hungry and I was tired a lot of the time. So I started researching it to see what I could do to really improve my diet and to dial it in and to speed up this recovery. And I found that by making a blender drink, I just blended things together that had a lot of essential fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, lots of chlorophyll from green plants, and high quality plant-based protein from things such as hemp and chia and flax, pea protein, rice protein, all these things, blended that up, had a blender drink each day. And that really seemed to help. So I started getting it right. But it did take about a year and a half before I really felt good eating that way. But once I figured it out, I found that made a significant difference. I was just able to work harder than other people, which meant I improved faster.
So there just are so many different conflicting philosophies out there. I just spent the last 3 days with a guy that swears by the paleo diet, which is exactly the opposite of the vegan diet. And, you've got the Atkins, you've got the Zone, and everybody has their testimonials about they used to have this disease or this ailment or this problem and this diet fixed it. And so it's hard to wade through that on this end of it, right? The one that's not promoting a particular diet and just trying to figure out how to find our way and be healthier and feel better and perform better. And so how do you know that that the one that you're using for yourself is the right one? I mean, convince us. Why should we listen to you of all the many voices that are available to us on this subject? What do you think that's, from your vantage point, of course, makes the one that you've chose the right one?
Yeah, it is a good question. It is overwhelming. Like you say, there's so much information out there. And I think it comes down to really finding what works well for you. And I think being open about things and trying it. And for me, I tried a bunch of different ways and I found that what I'm doing now works really well. And for me, it works the best. And that's actually the reason I wrote my first book was really just frequently asked questions. People were always asking me where to get my protein, my essential fats, my iron, my calcium. So I wrote and self-published a short book back in 2004 that was really just responding to those questions. And like I say, it works well for me. The other athletes I work with, it's working very well for them. So I'm now head of nutrition for the Garmin Sharp Pro Cycling team, which is one of the top pro teams in the world. And I work with a bunch of NFL, NHL, Major League Baseball, and UFC fighters. So it definitely works well for a bunch of people. But yeah, I've heard other people doing very well on other ways of eating too. And I think it just comes down to finding what works well for you.
So I don't want to lose our listeners here. Let's say that they aren't ready to do the all vegan thing just yet, as I know that I'm not. So help us with other ways of potentially optimizing our performance, energy, and vitality through other ideas and methods. One thing I know all our listeners want is more mental energy. What are some methods you'd recommend to boost our mental energy throughout the day?
Well, for me, it's exercise. And I'm often asked, how do you balance, or at least how did you balance a pro athlete career with writing and work, basically? And I don't look at it as balance. I look at it as two complementary things. I find the exercise I do, the workouts I do, like, for example, I went for a great trail run this morning and I got all these ideas and it stimulates the right side of my brain, which is the creative side. And it really complements the rest of the work I do throughout the day. So I think keeping that in mind is a good approach. And I think also too, finding what you enjoy doing. If it's not something you want to do, if you don't want to go out and do a certain workout or do any kind of work that you don't want to do over time, you actually burn out your ability to do that, and willpower can become exhausted. So I think constantly adding in things that you enjoy is going to make for a sustainable, long-term, successful life, really.
Okay, well, I agree. And so let's say whatever someone decides is going to be their new health plan. We know that the difficulty is transitioning to a new behavior, a new regimen, a new lifestyle. So give us a couple or three ideas on what one can do to make the difference in completing the transition into this new lifestyle. Some anchors or some tips that will help them through this process.
Well, I think start slow. And like you said before, not everyone is going to be completely vegan, and I don't think they need to be. I think it's about progress. It's not about perfection. What I talk about is certainly not an all or nothing type thing. You can definitely get significant benefits while only doing, one or two things that I suggest. You certainly don't have to do them all. You just kind of find what works for you. Maybe you'll take some, you'll leave others. That's fine. But I think starting slow is good. I think if someone's eaten a standard American diet for 4 decades, it's going to be very difficult for him or her to make that transition in a short amount of time. It will probably take a year if the person has really eaten poorly for a long time. So I think know that going in and be comfortable with it. Be okay with the fact that this is not a diet. This is a long-term lifestyle. So thinking about including things, like, as opposed to excluding, like, don't go and say, oh, I can't eat cheese now, or I can't have white flour, or whatever it is. Think of all the new things that you can add that basically crowd out the things that aren't so good. So for example, just adding hemp and chia and flax and lentils, legumes, beans, peas, chlorella, spirulina, kale, like all these great foods that a lot of people don't eat on a regular basis. You can just incorporate those into your diet. Before you know it, you just won't want to eat the stuff that's currently in your diet. Your palate will actually shift, and you'll start to crave the really good healthy foods, which is an amazing place to be, because when you crave the good food, you no longer want to eat the bad food. So you never feel deprived, you never feel left out, you don't feel as though you're making a sacrifice. And then that's sustainable. That's at the point where it's going to be long-term, and it's not something that you have to force yourself to do it. You do it because you genuinely want to do it. And that does take time, but it's a good investment, obviously.
Yeah, I know one of the decisions that I made was to not eat white flour. Just don't eat flour. And it really, that is in all the evil foods anyway. And for about a week and a half, couple of weeks, it was a little bit tough. And then you lose the taste for it altogether. And then if you even have a little bit of it, your body's now resensitized, and you feel it, right? It wreaks havoc, but it takes a little while, to make the transition. So let's speak to something that I know that all our listeners have issues with. They're all ambitious achievers with very busy schedules. You've had a lot of success with your books and business, and so I'm sure you're busy traveling a lot, and that could be stressful on your body. So talk about keeping things at balance during high stress periods, ways of handling stress mentally, physically, nutritionally. What are some of your recommendations there?
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And this is something that I've studied quite extensively because I became fascinated with it. Years ago, when I was training full-time, 35, 40 hours a week, my adrenals got burned out just from too much physical stress of training. And the interesting thing I found is that stress is stress. Doesn't matter where it comes from. It can be work-related, family-related. It can be environmental stress, like breathing polluted air. It can be psychological stress, worrying about things you don't have control over, for example. It can be physical stress of training. All stresses and all the same physiological response by the body, which is elevated cortisol. And when cortisol goes up, a bunch of bad things happen. Your ability to sleep deeply and get in that deep delta phase of sleep goes down dramatically. So you actually have to sleep more when your stress levels are higher because your quality of sleep is so poor. So that's huge. There's several ways to do it. One, of course, is just reducing overall stress, but that's the last thing a high achiever wants to hear, is that he or she has to work less. Although that would reduce stress, it reduces what I call complementary stress, which is what you don't want to do. Complementary stress is where you get a return. So working hard, for example, or training hard. You work hard, sure, it's stressful, your cortisol goes up, but you have something to show for it. You've achieved something. Training, same kind of thing. You train hard, you stress your body, but then your body overcompensates, you become stronger, you become fitter. There's a trade-off. So that's the sort of thing that we want to engage in, is complementary stress. What we want to reduce is uncomplimentary stress. So that's a stress that gives no benefit. So psychological, like I talked about, is in that group. Worrying about things you don't have control over. Just have a good perspective. See things from high above, the big picture view of things, and know what to worry about and what to focus on and what not to, what to let go. I think that's really important. And food, of course, too. A large percentage of the food that an average North American eats actually accounts for a large amount of total stress. And that has no gain. That's completely uncomplimentary stress. So you can cut that down significantly by cleaning up your diet. It will actually allow you to introduce more complementary stress, so therefore be more productive if you're, a high achiever, or, do more exercise if you're a pro athlete. So it's just a really good way to get more out of yourself. If you clean up your diet, you can actually get more done and be more successful.
Excellent. So if we were to just sort of boil this down to a few things, when you think about your own routine, okay, so if there were only three things that you absolutely couldn't live without as part of your health routine, what would those three things be?
Well, I really enjoy running, for example. So for me, if I don't run in a while, I get annoyed. I like running. So I'm not going to say I think everyone should run. In fact, some people should not run because they don't enjoy it. I think people should find an activity they like and make that part of their routine. You recharge yourself. You feel good when you take time out to do something that you really like to do. So for some people, maybe it's tennis, or it's walking, or it's going to a movie, or anything, whatever that is, restocking your willpower, and just feeling good about things. I think incorporating that into your daily routine is really important. And while you may be a little less productive that day, possibly, if you could go to a few movies and you're not working, but if you restock your willpower long term, you're actually going to get more done and be more productive. So I think building in a form of enjoyment into your daily activity is really, really important. So I think that's one for sure. I think also eating food throughout the day, I think, is important as opposed to eating big meals. And I find from a productivity standpoint too, grazing is really good. I tend to graze throughout the day as opposed to sitting down and eating 3 meals. I find with 3 meals a day, of course, you are quite hungry when it's time for those meals, and you're quite full when you're done with them. And I don't like that feeling of being really hungry and then being really full. And I find that my energy level is much more steady when I just graze. I kind of snack throughout the day. And this is something that the folks at Google have done for a while. They've put those cafes in their Googleplex in Mountain View, California, and everything's free. All the food is free. So employees can go up and eat whenever they want. And the result of that is grazing, which then means at 2 p.m, people aren't falling asleep in their cubicle because they've had a huge lunch. So productivity went way up with that. Sick days went down. And it's actually something we've adopted too. So at the Vega headquarters in Vancouver, we've done the same thing, and same result: better productivity, fewer sick days, and just all around a really sound approach. So I think grazing is a big one. And I think another one is not to get too caught up in anything that is not sustainable. I think any type of diet or any type of routine, any type of program that's short term, I'm always a little leery about. I personally like things that are ongoing, and sustainability to me is really important as part of the lifestyle. So I know some people, different personality types, are sort of drawn to different things, but to me, it's got to be sustainable to enjoy it. It's got to be something that I like, that's part of my routine, and is not just kind of a quick fix, so to speak, but it's more of a long-term lifestyle approach.
Fantastic. Well, on the note of making this long-term and a lifestyle approach, and we just talked about the three things that you couldn't live without in part of your routine. The last question I've got for you today, Brendan, as we venture forward with the knowledge that you've bestowed on us about healthy living and healthy nutritional choices, tell us what one thing we need to do to be sure that we do it on a regular basis, and if we do, it'll be a game changer when it comes to our health and wellness.
I think progress. I think just pick something, and it doesn't even matter what it is, but I think keeping yourself on this constant evolution is really important. Just always think about getting better, whatever that is. If it's you're cleaning up your diet, you're just doing one thing a day that is better than what you did the day before or the week before, and just constantly thinking of ways to improve and to innovate and to get better and kind of have that mindset. I think it's a whole approach to innovation and to improvement. And we're never going to be perfect. And that I don't even think should be the goal, but I think constantly trying to get better. And I think once you just weave that mindset into your daily routine, I think that's the key. I think that it'll just kind of take over and you'll be on autopilot from there, as someone who is always striving to be better.
Fantastic. Well, Brendan Brazier, creator of the Vega program and best-selling author of Thrive, thank you so much for coming in and talking with our success readers and inspiring a healthy lifestyle. And I'm sure there will be great results as a result of people learning the tips that were shared here today. So thanks so much for being with us today, Brendan.
You're welcome. Thanks, Darren.